Hi everyone, welcome to the June 21st edition of the TimeformUS Pacecast. I'm David Aragona, back from my brief vacation, joined by my usual co-host Craig Mulkowski. Craig, I know that I missed our Belmont Stakes recap from last week, but I listened to a little bit of what you did with Emily, and I was happy to hear you guys get the chance to recap the races. I know a lot of people want to get your takes on those Belmont Stakes weekend races, so I was happy that you two got the chance to do that after you both handicapped the races the prior week. I thought that was pretty fitting, so I just want to give a thanks to Emily for filling in. And Craig, I know that you had some other duties last week, but I want to thank you for covering for me in all of those areas. So we'll be looking forward from here on out, and we'll be recapping some of the racing from last weekend that I did miss, including races from Monmouth Park, Santa Anita, Belmont, and Churchill. So we'll cover all of that on this podcast. But Craig, didn't seem like I missed too much major racing last week.
No, there wasn't a ton. I was actually surprised when you sent the list of how much there was, because I was so focused on Belmont with doing the morning line that, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the other racing. So I had to go back, watch a lot of replays, but I think I'm ready to tackle this show.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I'm fresh off the layoff, but didn't have the smoothest vacation week. I was just telling Craig off air I had my first ever bout with COVID during the vacation, so things didn't quite go as planned for me, but luckily I'm feeling better just in time to come back to work, so it's nice how those things work out. But Craig, we'll look back at some racing from last weekend. Monmouth Park is where I guess most of the high-level action took place on that Saturday card. They ran 3 graded stakes races, some nice speed figures. Let's talk about the Grade 3 Salvatore Mile, which was the final race that ran on that Saturday card, and this was a really exciting battle between Mind Control and Hot Rod Charlie, the heavy favorite who actually went down to defeat here.
He did, and when I watched the race, I wasn't really impressed, but the speed figure came back pretty good. It's a 125 for the winner. Mind Control, I don't have the chart in front of me. I would assume Hot Rod Charlie probably got the same figure. Yeah, it's solid race from him. I was a little disappointed he wasn't able to get the win. I have to admit, I do get the impression Hot Rod Charlie has a little hang in him, because he did pass Mind Control. And while Mind Control is a tough, gritty, older horse, he's still pretty much a grade 2, grade 3 horse at this point in his career. And it was kind of disappointing to see Hot Rod Charlie get a full head in front of him and then get repassed.
Yeah, I was having this debate with somebody whether or not Hot Rod Charlie is a horse where they need to put the blinkers back on, but then I was going back and watching some of his races with blinkers, and he still had some hang in him back then when he wore the blinkers, so he might just be that kind of horse who doesn't really want to forge past horses and go on to victory, because I agree with you. It seemed like he had this race won coming around the far turn. He was traveling better than Mind Control, but when you don't put away Mind Control, you always have to be afraid that he's going to come back on you, because he's a horse that does not like to lose a photo finish. I was looking through his past performances, and Mind Control's been in 7 races where the margin of victory has been less than a length, and he's won 6 of those, and most of the ones that have been decided by a head or less, he's won. So he's just a horse that has a nose for the wire, and he was able to get up here. Hot Rod Charlie, they're going to target the Whitney next. We'll see if he can take his form back into grade 1 company, but he earned a grade 1 level speed figure here, just got beaten by a horse that ran a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'm curious what they're going to do with Mind Control, because most of his success has come at the sprint distances. He did have that nice win at Parks last year in a 1-turn mile, which had him pointing to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. That obviously didn't work out. Something went wrong and he wasn't able to show up. But maybe at this advanced age, I mean, he's a 6-year-old now, probably not as quick as he once was, but maybe the 2 turns will be more to his liking.
Yeah, and that Parks race was actually 2 turns as well. So yeah. He's not a horse that's gone 2 turns very much in his career. I think he just did it once prior to that in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile back when he was a 2-year-old. I believe he got a terrible trip that day. But recently he just has those two-turn races, and they've arguably been the best races that he's run in the past couple of seasons. So maybe going longer is what this horse is ultimately going to want to do. I don't know if stretching out beyond a mile is going to be to his liking, but it just seems like he can get a more forward position in these longer races, and he doesn't really have the speed to stick with the leaders in some of the 6 furlong, 6.5 furlong sprints anymore. So maybe that's a reason why he's liking the longer distances, because he just ends up working out a better trip in these races.
Yeah, and the only other thing I want to add about this race is please no more Cheryl Spate on the dirt. I don't know why you'd take a Grade 1 turf winner and put him in a Grade 3 on the dirt against a couple of really good horses, but I think we've seen enough. Cheryl Spate is a turf horse.
Yeah, we'll get to the Grade 3 poker a little bit later. They ran another Grade 3 event on the turf at Monmouth this day. It seems like he could have won either of those races given the way that they were run, but for some reason they wanted to give the dirt a try here. I agree with you, though. His future is on the grass. Before we get to some of those turf stakes, though, Craig, let's talk about the one other dirt stakes from Saturday at Monmouth Park. That was the Pegasus Stakes, listed stakes race. That's a prep for the Haskell Stakes next month, that Grade 1 Jewel of the Summer meet at Monmouth Park. Not sure that the winner of this race, Homebrew, was necessarily going to be a major player in the Haskell, but he did take a big step forward here for Brad Cox in what was a visually impressive win.
Yeah, it was a good race for him and a big jump in his speed figure from a 106 last time to a 114 here. And it was a little bit of a turn back at distance. He had showed a 1.125 wasn't a problem last time. So maybe he's a horse just moving in the right direction. I will say his main competition in here, electability, broke through the gate prior to the start. And maybe that hurt that one a little bit, but he won it powerfully enough to think it was a good performance. He's still got a ways to go to be in the same league as some of the Grade 1 3-year-olds we've seen, but he's certainly moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll admit this is a horse that hadn't really been on my radar prior to this. I know he had won that Oaklawn Stakes at the end of April, not really beating much of a field that day. Went back and watched that race, and he kind of did it in workmanlike fashion. This was by far the best race that he's put forth in his career, and you had to like that turn of foot that he displayed coming to the quarter pole, and you can kind of see the move that he made when you look at the TimeformUS pace figure line for this race, because from the third to the fourth call, he shows a huge 11-point jump in his pace figure, so a 104 up to a 115 with a 118 final time figure. That's the kind of closing splits that you see in a turf race, but he was able to do that on the dirt. So nice to see a horse able to close into those slow fractions on the dirt. Not really sure what that says for his ability to move forward again off this race, because he is likely to move up into much tougher company next time out, but this is definitely a horse that's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and like I said, the one thing about him is I do think the farther the race is, the better it'll be for him, being a street sense out of a Tappet mare. And just the way he runs, as you said, it looks like he wants to run all day.
Let's move over to the grass course at Monmouth Park and talk about a couple of the Grade 3 races they ran on that Saturday card, beginning with the older males in the Grade 3 Monmouth Stakes. No surprise to see a short price Chad Brown horse the winner here, as Sacred Life gets the job done. A horse that had had some trouble getting to the winner's circle earlier this year, but I think one that you could have made multiple excuses for, and he just found the right field against some lesser horses at Monmouth Park.
Yeah, looking through the PPs of this race, I think you could almost argue that even money was probably an overlay on this horse. Manny Franco came in for the ride. He's a guy that's been riding really well of late, and he did everything right here. And Sacred Life was able to win pretty easily. He got a 121 speed figure, which is pretty much what he runs on his best days when he wins. So good effort from him. It's a Grade 3. That's probably what kind of horse he is. Maybe he could step up a little bit into a Grade 2, but I don't think we'd see him winning any Grade 1s without some improvement. But Chad Brown, as we've seen this year, he knows how to pick his spots and get the most out of his horses, because he's just still winning races at ridiculous rates.
Yeah, Chad Brown is having an amazing year. I believe this was his first winner of the Monmouth meet. A little bit surprising. They've been running there for, I think, a little over a month at this point. But he does keep a string at Monmouth, though often those horses ship up to Belmont Park. Yeah, Sacred Life, he had raced 3 times so far this year prior to this. He's just not really Grade 1 level, so he wasn't able to be successful in the Pegasus, but he didn't get the right pace situation in the Mervyn Muniz, and then caught that boggy turf course in the Fort Marcy last time. So he was in better form than it appeared coming into this race. And like you said, even money that probably didn't even capture how good he looked compared to the rest of this field. So no surprise that he was able to get the job done. Decent effort for second second by safe conduct, a horse that I have liked different points in the past. He did improve with an allowance victory in his start prior to this, getting a 120 Timeform US speed figure, and was able to validate that number here. So just seems like another horse that's in pretty good form right now.
Yeah, and he's a horse who generally needs the lead to run his best. So it's he wasn't on the lead; he was just off. So it was good to see he could track another horse and still run a good race and put up a good speed figure.
We saw a bit of an upset in the other graded stakes on turf at Monmouth on Saturday. That was an 8-1 upset by the Shug McGahee trained Stolen Holiday as she wired the field in the Eatontown Stakes as Shug went 1-2 here with both of his runners completing the exacta. And Craig, I don't know what some of the riders were thinking in this race, letting Stolen Holiday get away with the fractions that she did, because it's not like she's a bad horse. They just basically conceded the race to her in the early going, and riders on horses like Alms and Princess Grace wanted no part of the early lead, and they paid the price.
Yeah, they did. It did make a lot of sense to me, particularly Princess Grace. Now, she is a mare now who has shown the ability to win up on the lead, but also to come from off the pace before. And maybe they've just talked themselves into that speed's a bad thing for her. So I'm not sure what was going on there. But yeah, this race was basically over after the half mile call. And given the way it's set up, the favorite in the race, I believe, was Fluffy Sock. She just had absolutely no chance closing into that pace.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand her as such a heavy favorite in here. Sure, her form was solid, but it's not like she had some big speed figure advantage over this field. As for the winner, Stolen Holiday, I mean, she was good enough to take advantage of the situation that she was handed, and she was able to get this graded stakes victory here, which is probably going to be pretty significant for her broodmare value because she has this gigantic pedigree being by Warfront. If you look up her dam, Silk and Scarlet, she has produced some very good runners, including, I believe, a Group 1 winner in Japan, Minaret, who won the Belmont Oaks, Master of Hounds, who I believe was a Group 1 winner for Aidan O'Brien. So she's got the pedigree to be a very valuable broodmare, and now she's got this graded stakes victory on her resume. And she had gone shorter in the past, shown some sprint speed, and when you let a horse that can really sprint away from you get away with some pedestrian early fractions, you're just never going to catch them, and the rest of the field couldn't really get into this race.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it. I think she ran a 117 speed figure, upgraded from a 112 final time because of how fast she finished. And just to show how slow the pace was, that final time figure of 112 was earned after the first quarter mile was only a 64. So, and even the half mile was only a 72. So the first half mile was just a walk.
Let's finish up the stakes action at Monmouth from this past weekend by talking about one race from their Sunday card. That was the Select Stakes, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf. And the two major players in here, Craig, were the Critical Way and Karatari, two turf sprinters who have been in great form as of late, but they have very similar running styles, and they went at it on the front end and basically just knocked each other out, going a little bit too fast, as the Monmouth-loving Belgrano was able to cause the minor upset.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of crazy speed duels at 5.5 furlongs, or if you do, usually the horses can stick around anyway. But in this case, it just didn't happen as they went way too fast, as you say, the Critical Way and Karatari just battling on the front end. And Belgrano, as you say, loves Monmouth Park, has good tactical speed. It's not like he closed from way back. He was just a couple lengths back, and just a great ride from Jorge Vargas to sit in behind and time his move perfectly to just edge out proven strategies. 119 for the winner, which is, I think, his career best figure, and not surprising given the perfect setup that he had.
Yeah, Belgrano has been the best horse, real success story for his trainer, Frank Russo. I believe a guy who's been a trainer since the 70s, but has had very small stable and very limited success if you look through Equibase until about the past 4 years when he's kind of suddenly turned into a 25 to 30% trainer with a very small set of horses. I think he has just about 10 horses. And I was looking up some of his stats in Formulator over that period, about the past 5 years. He's got a $3.58 8-cent ROI, which is insane for all starters for a stable. And Belgrano, his PPs kind of exemplify that. He's just really come to hand for this barn over the past 2 or 3 years. And when he gets the right distance, which seems to be 5.5 furlongs at Monmouth Park, he's pretty dangerous. And that was the case here. And he also got a great pace setup, as you were alluding to. So a horse that can be dangerous when things go his way. And that was the case on Sunday at Monmouth Park. Let's finish up Monmouth by talking about one race that we can't go without mentioning from this last Friday. That was a 2-year-old maiden event from the start of their week there. And the third race on Friday was won by the Todd Pletcher-trained Money's Gold, a 2-year-old filly by Munnings, who ran an extremely fast speed figure for a juvenile first-time starter in June. Craig, I'll let you put this in context a little bit. It's rare to see 2-year-olds this early in the summer running TimeformUS speed figures of 110 plus.
Yeah, it certainly is now. There was a time, maybe 20 years ago, when 2-year-olds came out fully cranked and would run big numbers like this, but I haven't seen this for a while, and I'm not sure where this one came from, but it certainly was an easy speed figure to make. There was plenty of dirt racing and sprints on the card, so a 113 is one of the bigger ones I can remember. I'll have to look it up in the database and see where it puts her historically, especially from a filly, though as 2-year-olds, usually the fillies are just as quick as the colts, so I don't think the sex matters as much here. The one thing I will note is we do have it coded in bright red as a highly speed favoring track. It's iffy for me when I look through the charts. There are obviously several wire-to-wire winners, but I also see a lot of favorites that were expected to winning. There were, I think, a couple of turf races on the 8-race card, so I'd hold off judgment on it being a speed bias track.
Yeah, I'm just flipping through the charts right now. The biggest priced winner on the dirt this day was 2-1. So yeah, I agree. I'm not sure that really means too much, that the results were as expected with speeds winning. But no, I wouldn't take too much away from this filly. She just motored away from this field. And it's not just the fact that she ran a fast time, 56-3 for the 5 furlongs, which translated to that speed figure. And we should note it's a 1:16 final time number. So the pace actually made it downgraded a little bit to the 1:13 TimeformUS speed figure. But aside from the fact that she ran that fast time, there were huge gaps behind her for a 5-furlong race. I mean, she was obviously 14.5 lengths ahead of the runner-up, but the runner-up was an additional 7.25 lengths to the third-place finisher, then nearly 6 lengths back to the fourth-place finisher. I mean, the horses that were beaten in this race were well beaten, which is often a signifier of a horse that did run an exceptionally fast speed figure. So I think that kind of validates the number that Money's Gold ran, and you have to think this one was a bit of a surprise for Todd Pletcher. I mean, given the fact that he ran her at Monmouth Park, and she wasn't even the favorite in this race. She went off as the second choice at 8-5, but they know what she is now, so I would imagine we'll see her in one of the major races this summer, probably starting in a stakes at Saratoga next time.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a move just because there haven't been a lot of 2-year-old races on the dirt at Belmont. I assume they haven't been able to get them to fill. And what I found interesting was the horse who was the favorite, a filly sent out by Kelly Breen, Spouty's Girl, is actually the one that challenged her earlier, and at least tried to challenge her, and wound up beating 31 lengths in here. So I do think she's a serious talent. Not that that's a big revelation or anything based on how she won, but as you say, I don't think that 113 is any kind of fluke.
Yeah, and the noteworthy part of this race for me is that she ran her last eighth of this race in 11.38 seconds. I mean, typically, you see these 2-year-olds run really fast early, come busting out of the gate, run a fast quarter, and then kind of get tired and slow down as the race goes on, especially in these 5-furlong events. But, I mean, she was running as hard through the wire as she was coming around the far turn. It's like she just stayed at the same pace for the entire race. You rarely see that with a 2-year-old. That obviously bodes well for her to get a slightly longer sprint distance, like 6.5 furlongs. But I think that just cements that there's some quality here. So we'll see where she goes, but very noteworthy fast speed figure for this 2-year-old filly. Let's move on to our next venue, Santa Anita, where they also ran some graded stakes this past weekend, including a couple on the turf on their Sunday card. The final race on that Sunday race card was the Grade 3 American going the mile on the turf. And this one was won by Hong Kong Harry, a horse that is now 3 for 3 in the United States. He had won a couple of races earlier in the year, one of which he got a huge TimeformUS speed figure for with a big pace bonus. But coming off a slight layoff here, got into the winner circle in a graded stakes for the first time, and interesting to see how far he can go with this winning streak.
Yeah, he was impressive here. He hasn't quite matched that 126. I don't have the official speed figure. I'm guessing it's going to be around a 117. But he just keeps winning, and he's winning these races pretty easily. He wasn't really threatened much in here, just as he hasn't been in his prior two starts. And I think it's pretty impressive that he was able to turn back. He's won a mile and an eighth in both of his prior races, and it didn't seem to phase him at all. And here is he was able to just track what was a pretty tepid pace again. I would imagine when the pace figures come in, and he did just fine. So he looks like a horse. I'm not sure what to make of him. The speed figures don't say he's a top class horse, but when you keep winning like he does, you got to keep your eyes out. And maybe he's just one of those ones that runs as fast as he needs to.
Yeah, this was a race where long shots completed the exacta and trifecta, so make of that what you will. Maybe it wasn't the strongest race from a quality standpoint. I mean, the most accomplished horse in here is actually Tripoli, who was fourth, the Pacific Classic winner from last year, but he just doesn't seem like he's at the top of his game right now. This is probably a race where he's looking to get back onto the dirt, going longer at some point, maybe a prep for something, and he didn't take any money in here, going off at nearly 8-1. So Hong Kong Harry, the bettors were on him here, betting him down to 2-1. Maybe again, that speaks to the level of competition. But as you said, he's going to have to run a faster speed figure, a faster, legitimately earned speed figure, not just getting that big pace bonus if he's going to be competitive against some better horses in the future. The other graded stakes they ran on Sunday at Santa Anita was the San Juan Capistrano for the Turf Marathoners, and this one a bit of an upset as it was won by Breakpoint, going out for the first time for the Neil Drysdale barn, a horse that had been a big disappointment first coming into this country for Chad Brown, then going to Steve Asmussen, just not really able to put together competitive performances, but the stretch out and distance seemed to do the trick here.
Yeah, the stretch out in distance, and it seemed like some of the others didn't want to go this far, even though I know Red King has gone this far and done well. He didn't really show up. So Breakpoint was able to get the job done off of, admittedly, some horrendous looking running lines. The fact he was 9-1 kind of tells you what the field looked like. He's probably going to get around a 113 figure, and I say figure because we don't really make speed figures for a mile and 3/4. It's more like a race rating than it is a speed figure. So don't know how much utility this figure will have or where Breakpoint will show up next, but this wasn't much of a field.
Yeah, Breakpoint's a horse that had looked pretty good in his native Chile before coming to the U.S. I think he had won all 5 starts there, but had just not been able to translate that form to the United States. I remember, I think I was at Belmont Park when he made his debut for Chad Brown, and there were thoughts that he could be a major player in some of the races that summer, like he was going to be the next star for the Chad Brown barn, and it just didn't pan out at all. But the stretch out and getting to set the pace apparently made a difference here, and also getting into the Neil Drysdale barn. But like you said, not the strongest division in California, going long on the turf. The runner-up in here, Red King, he's a decent horse. He's not going to be winning grade 1s or competitive in grade 1s at any point, but he is a solid grade 3 performer, and he was maybe a little bit unlucky to lose this race, just being stymied in traffic for much of the stretch drive. He probably would have won if his rider had been able to get him out into the clear just a half second sooner, but it didn't work out that way, and Breakpoint was able to hold on and cause the upset. Moving on to Saturday's card, where they ran the Grade 2 Santa Maria on the dirt for the fillies and mares. Again, not the most inspiring division in Southern California right now, as these races, all for the older fillies and mares going along on the dirt, have been earning some mediocre speed figures. And I haven't seen the number for this race, Craig, but I'm imagining it's the same story for Private Mission, who at least got back to the winner's circle for the first time following her victory in last year's Grade 2 Zenyatta, but just really hasn't been the same horse since last year.
No, she had ran off a nice string of races, but mediocrity was probably the right word. She's going to get about a one. Well, she did get a 110. I actually processed the Saturday speed figures this morning from my assistant, and I have no argument with that number. These are not grade two horses. I don't care what the grading of the race says. Maybe Private Mission was at one time, but she's not now, and she just beat up on some horses who aren't all that good. I mean, Blue Stripe's okay. She ran a decent race in the distaff. Last year, she came back with a nice win first time out, but even that was only with a 112 figure, and she wasn't able to get the job done. So I don't want to beat up on California racing too much, but it's kind of ugly out there right now when grade twos look like this.
Let's finish up the stakes action from last week at Santa Anita by talking about one of the 2-year-old stakes that they ran on that Saturday card. There were races for both the Colts and Geldings and the Fillies, but we're going to talk about the female version, which was the Facing Tipton Debutante won by Stone Silent. This was actually a first-time starter that they had paid a lot of money for, $410,000 at the OBS March sale after she had worked a quarter mile in 20 and 2/5 seconds, and she was clearly ready to go early, and she put forth a professional effort to win her debut against Stakes Company, beating the previous stakes winner, Tom's Regret, who closed for second. But this first-time starter, Craig, looked pretty professional.
Yeah, she did look like a good one. I mean, she beat Tom's Regrets, had been 2 for 2, had won them with decent speed figures around the 90 range, and she handled her pretty easily. I'm going to assume she ran faster than Mail since we're not talking about that one. So good effort from her. It got a 97 TimeformUS speed figure. So yeah, this one's promising. And obviously she took some money at the window. She was only 3-1 second choice in here. So the word was out a little bit, and she clearly has some talent.
Yeah, this race went nearly a full second faster than the Facing Tipton Juvenile, so that's usually a good sign when the fillies run that much faster than the boys. And yeah, I think the runner-up in here is a decent horse, and she beat that one fair and square, so looks like a horse with a future. Sometimes these early season 2-year-old stakes races don't have a major impact on the races later in the season. These horses are going to have to show that they can stretch out beyond 5 and 5.5 furlongs, but this is certainly the way that you want to start a career. Let's, before we move away from Santa Anita, talk about one more race that I believe was the biggest speed figure given out at Santa Anita last week, and maybe the biggest speed figure given out anywhere in the country. You can confirm that, Craig, but that was earned by Bolden in a Friday allowance race going 6 furlongs on the turf. A horse who's now 3 for 3 in his career as a California bred. This was his first ever turf start, and he seemed to love the green on Friday.
He did, and you're right. When I put out the list on Twitter, he was right there at the top of it. He got a 126 TimeformUS speed figure for the win. I had to do a little double check to see where this race came from. I mean, this was a Calbred allowance race. We don't often see 6 furlong turf races getting those kind of speed figures, but he's a horse who won his first 2 starts by nearly 12 lengths combined. First 2 times out, he won by 6 lengths yet again, and this seems to be a really talented horse. When you look at the figures for the horses in behind him in his prior races, there's nothing to say they weren't totally legit. And I'd say the same thing here. You don't see horses winning off by, he actually won by almost 8 lengths this time in these turf sprints. So I'm not sure what to make of him other than who's that other really fast California bred sprinter? He could give him some problems on the front end.
Yes, Brickyard Ride, I believe, is
Yes.
the one that you're referring to. Yeah, no, this horse seems pretty fast. Craig, I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe one of the listeners can. How was this horse eligible to run in this race? This was a non-winners of one California bred allowance race, and he had just won the condition in his prior start, not in for the tag. Again, not in for the tag here. I don't understand how he was eligible for this race. Maybe it's something to do with the surfaces and the fact that he won the other condition on the dirt. That seems like an odd rule if that is the rule.
Yeah, I
But
do think that is the rule in California that dirt wins don't count in turf races. I think that's something they put in a couple years ago to try to help with the field size.
That's interesting. I wound up in a situation here where he was able to face a pretty soft field in his first try on the turf, but clearly loved it, ran by far the best speed figure of his career so far. I did see a quote from Phil D'Amato after this race, and they basically said they're not interested in keeping him on the turf. They're looking to go back to the dirt with this horse and try races like the Bing Crosby or Pat O'Brien at Del Mar. So he might face off against that horse Brickyard Ride pretty soon if they run in races like that.
Yeah, and don't quote me on that rule. That is something when we post it, I'll kind of ask the listeners. I do think I recall something about that, though. But yeah, he's obviously super talented. I certainly wouldn't be writing off turf racing for him off of this performance because, as we know, turf racing is getting more and more popular in this country. Even in California, more than half the races, it seems, are on turf these days. So I wouldn't be restricting my options with him because a 126 turf sprinting is a very, very fast number.
Let's move on to Belmont Park, where they really didn't have that much high-level racing this past week. The only graded stakes that they ran was the Poker on Saturday, grade 3 event going the one-turn mile. Very short field signed on. I don't really know what's going on with that. There was obviously a similar race in Monmouth, the Monmouth Stakes, that attracted a much bigger field. I don't know if the fact that you can run out on Lasix at Monmouth and not on Lasix at Belmont in these races had something to do with that. But nobody really wanted to sign up to face Mason here. I'm not sure that this is a horse that you have to be that scared of, though, Craig, because I was a little underwhelmed by this victory.
Yeah, he looked really good in his win back in the beginning of May at Belmont when he beat only two other horses, including Wolfie's Dinah Ghost, ran a 125 speed figure. This time he only got a 125. I mean, he ran fine. He never looked like he was going to lose, but the same horse, Wolfie's Dinah Ghost, that was basically eased last time in that three-horse field, was able to stick around for second. The one I'd like to see going forward is actually Public Sector, who I think had a big excuse over that Churchill Downs turf course that we talked about. And given the pace setup in here and the trip he had, I thought he ran every bit as good as the winner.
Yeah, it's a very minor point. I posted something on Twitter about this, but the margin of victory in this race is clearly wrong. Mason won this race by about a length and a half. I posted a screenshot of it on Twitter. I've been seeing this a few times at Belmont recently where the margins just seem to be condensed a little bit. I don't know if that's just the chart caller's preference, wanting to round these down a little bit, but this seemed just obviously not one length of margin of victory. And the Sanctuary City, who's getting basically the same speed figure as everybody else, beaten officially a length. I mean, he's beaten closer to like 2 lengths, a length and 3/4. So that's something just to be aware of for speed figures. I don't know if maybe Equibase will change that. This horse, despite the margin of victory, I was a little underwhelmed by the performance. He did get rank in the early stages, but didn't show that turn of foot that we had seen from him in his prior start. I know this is a horse that Chad Brown has talked about wanting to target at the grade 1 4-star Dave. He's going to have to run a little better than he did here if he's going to win a race like that.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point. I will certainly bring it up with the people at Equibase because at the finish, the margins are supposed to come from the photo finish camera. That there's not supposed to be any subjectivity involved there like it is at the face call. So it's certainly something I will pass on and see what's going on because that would seem to be an issue. And it would certainly change the speed figures, particularly at turf when you have smaller margins. The margins are enhanced a little bit point wise compared to dirt because races are just generally tighter on the turf. So good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. I hadn't seen that on Twitter, and we'll get that taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in a situation like this, it's only going to change things by a point or two, but it's, in other situations, I've noticed horses losing by officially 6 lengths when it looks like 8 lengths, stuff like that. Everything just looks a little bit condensed. And this is one that it was kind of too glaring for me to ignore because it's the winner of the race and those 3 horses in a photo for second. Before we move on from Belmont Park, we don't often talk about claiming races on this show, but we did have one that earned a pretty notable speed figure from their Saturday card last week as a couple of horses in a $40,000 claiming race earned 120 TimeformUS speed figures, one of which is the winner, 235, as he and Air Attack drew well clear of the rest of the field they were facing.
Yeah, it's not often, and I don't post the claiming figures on the when I do the list for the week. I guess that's something I could remedy. They don't often come up, so I didn't look at them. But I don't think there's much doubt these two horses ran a really quick race in here. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but it was a pretty big gap back to third, almost a dozen lengths, I believe. So it totally fits, and it just seems like they ran the other horses off their feet, and not in the way that they went out to the lead, because both of them kind of tracked the fast pace. And then when they took over, the others just had nothing left. And big efforts from them. I never really know what to make of these big figures in claiming races, because at the end of the day, they are claiming horses, and rarely do they hold this form very long. But these were definitely two noteworthy efforts: 120 for the winner, 118 back in second.
Yeah, both are horses that have plenty of back class. The winner 235 is a horse that used to run in graded stakes races out in California. It was second or third in, I think, the San Pasquale a couple years ago. So definitely one that has run big races before. Air Attack has run some huge speed figures on occasion himself. And they're both going out for barns that have been doing very well lately at Belmont Park, American Cantor Mossy and Rob Atras. So make of that what you will. But yeah, I just wanted to mention it because it was one of the bigger speed figures on dirt from this past week. Let's finish things up with a look at Churchill Downs, where no real stakes racing to highlight from this past weekend, but they did run a couple of allowance races on Saturday that earned decent speed figures, one of which was a 1.5 mile marathon allowance race won by the 3-year-old Western River, a horse that had briefly been considered a possible runner in the Belmont Stakes. They instead found this easier spot for him to try the 1.5 mile distance, and seemed like he handled it pretty well.
Yeah, I got to admit, I was kind of wondering when I first saw the rundown why you had put this on there. And then I remembered he was a 3-year-old. So it made sense to step up and beat older, going 1.5 miles. He did so with a 117 speed figure. So really solid effort there. And, maybe you don't get a lot of chances to run at a 1.5 miles in this country, but they're getting more and more common, at least more than they have been in the recent 5 or 6 years. They seem to be expanding, and he won so easily. Maybe he's a horse who will just thrive at these longer distances.
Yeah, he is the younger full brother to Belmont Stakes winner Creator, so he's always been cut out to go these longer distances, and they found the right spot for him to try it here. It wasn't facing much of a field, to be honest, and with turf racing having been canceled for the foreseeable future at Churchill Downs, this might have been one of those races that was originally carded for the turf or scheduled for the turf in the condition book and transferred to the dirt, which probably dilutes the field even further. So these turf horses have to find somewhere to run. So don't want to put too much stock in this performance, but it's always nice to see new players in this marathon division. Maybe he's one that can step up in these races moving forward. Let's finish things up on this podcast with one more race from Churchill Downs. That was an allowance race from later in the day on Saturday, won by On the Ones and Twos, a horse that had looked pretty impressive when she won her debut as a 2-year-old last year. Had some trouble getting back to the winner's circle since then, but was able to get through this N1X condition here, beating Tarabi, who was a very good grade 1 place 2-year-old from last year. She, though, was returning from a layoff.
Yeah, and what I liked here, I mean, this was a big jump in speed figure for her. She moved all the way from, I think her career best had been a 103. She had won a 99 last time. She jumped all the way up to a 115 here, and she looked good doing it. She showed really good early speed and just was able to keep that lead from start to finish. So good, solid effort from her, and definitely seems to be one on the improve.
Yeah, I thought she put in a good effort here, and just nice to see the runner-up Tarabi back in action. She was the horse that had been second to Echo Zulu in the Spinaway last year and third to Echo Zulu in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, so a horse with plenty of stakes credentials, and clearly something kept her off the racetrack for a long time, but she got back in action here, and not like she, took much of a step backwards, actually probably a step forwards from a speed figure standpoint, but she probably will do better with this race under her belt, and maybe a stretch out in distance in the future is in the cards for her.
Now, I have to mention, I know we cut it, but I know I'm going to get questions about it, and I know it's a fan of yours, and my buddy Chuck Simon's a huge Happy Jack fan. So I just want to mention the horse got a 108 speed figure for the win, because I just want to save a bunch of responses on Twitter. He's got a pretty big fan base out there, so I wanted to mention it. It's probably not as high as people were expecting.
Well, I mean, I'm one of the OG Happy Jack fans before all this Kentucky Derby and Preakness hoopla. Followers of mine will know that I picked this horse in the Robert B. Lewis and the San Felipe, like back from way before he was a thing. So I'm gonna wave my Happy Jack flag right now. But no, yeah, he's just okay. He's not a horse that is ever going to be competing effectively in Grade One races, and most likely unless he takes a big step forward. I did think that he was pretty game in this victory, Craig. I mean, he looked like he was surrounded at multiple points and just kept fighting off horses. And the most notable part about this race for me from Happy Jack was the gallop out, where he only won by, what was it, a head or a neck? But I mean, he just rocketed away from this field around the far turn like he probably will appreciate more ground in the future. But he's probably going to be a horse that they would be better off to target at some of those lesser derbies throughout the summer and fall.
Yeah, and I will say I'm a Happy Jack fan too, if for no other reason that this is a horse we didn't see debut until this year. He showed up in late January in a maiden race at Santa Anita, and I think he's already run. I think this was his seventh race. He went through the rigors of the Triple Crown. He didn't run very well, but he survived and was able to produce that winning effort. So I know we see a lot of horses that get kind of just vanish after they show up and don't run well in the Derby or the Preakness or never seem to be the same. So if anything else, this guy's a warrior.
Well, that's it for our recap on the Pacecast this week. Not the most high-level week in racing with not too many graded stakes to talk about, but we did see some nice, promising performances, particularly from that 2-year-old filly at Monmouth Park. So some things to look forward to from this week, moving ahead to the rest of the summer. Craig, I think there are just 3 weeks left in the Belmont Park meet, so that means that Saratoga is less than a month away. Often there's a bit of a lull in the calendar at this time of year, but I think we do have some big weeks coming up. That Stars and Stripes week at Belmont Park, I think, is just a couple weeks away. Not exactly sure what's going to be on tap for us on the forecast this week, and I haven't looked that far ahead in the schedule, but I'm sure we'll find a decent sequence to talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. I think the Ohio Derby's this week. Not saying that we're going to do a Thistledown card, but just in the interim between now and Saratoga, I saw Life is Good is going to be coming back at Belmont Park, and say what you will about him, he's got to be one of the most exciting horses in training. We haven't seen him since he was over in the desert, so good to have him back, and I look forward to seeing what kind of form he comes back in.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very exciting division. It'll be great to see him if he could match up against Flightline or some of the others that have run some big speed figures in that division this year. So we'll look forward to all of that in the coming weeks and months. Everybody, thanks for listening this week, and make sure to catch that Timeform US forecast when we come back to record that on Friday.